1. David Montgomery, Iowa State, 5'10", 220 seconds, SPARQ, percentile, 20.2 comp. Kareem Hunt Montgomery went underlooked as a prep recruit because he was miscast as a dual-threat quarterback. Heading into his senior year of high school, Montgomery still didn't have an FBS scholarship offer. But a local coach named Matt Campbell, then at Toledo, noted similarities in frame and running style between this wonky 5'10" dual-threat quarterback. You needed a SWAT team to tackle and a platoon back on his Rockets team, an ascending young MAC talent named Kareem Hunt. As the 2015 season was wrapping up, Campbell took the Iowa State job. He wasn't sure if he was going to have room for Montgomery at Toledo, where the running back room is typically crowded with Power 5 talent, but he certainly had space on this wasteland of a Cyclones roster he'd inherited. With very few appealing offers, Montgomery chose Iowa State. From there, the man I call Monty Python quickly displaced Mike Warren, 1,339 yards and 14 TD as a freshman the year before Montgomery arrived, as the team's bell cow back. Monty played the Kareem Hunt to Warren's Terry Swanson in year one, splitting carries evenly. That same year, Hunt was going nuclear on the MAC. In 2017, Monty broke out nationally as Hunt was finishing No. 2 to Alvin Kamara in the NFL's Rookie of the Year voting. Montgomery and Hunt's stories diverged in 2018. That's where their comp diverges, too. Montgomery is a warrior who you don't have to worry about off the field. Campbell raves about Montgomery and credits him for turning around the Iowa State program. Montgomery came from poverty. He understood early that his only way out was an unimpeachable work ethic. He promised his mom as a freshman in high school that she wouldn't have to worry about paying for college. Through Campbell, he fulfilled that promise. You could say the two are close. In the 2017 NFL Draft, Hunt fell to round 2 in part because he tested as a 27.7% SPARQ athlete during his pre-draft process. After the NFL Combine, Montgomery stands at 20.2%, though he'll rise at least a bit as superior pro day results are swapped in. But the upshot is that Montgomery has eerie similarities to Hunt, and he comes from the same college coach, Campbell, who repeatedly made the comp before it became popular on. In my notes, I have one box in Montgomery's column with the words God Mode Tackle Breaker. He was the NCAA's best in this department. Per PFF, Montgomery ranks No. 1 in this class in missed tackles forced over the past 2 seasons, with 0.39 forced per attempt. For reference, Damian Harris had 0.15. Not only is Montgomery powerful, but he's slippery and can make you miss, or merely mess up your angle enough to steal the power from the impending blow. All of which gives Montgomery elite contact balance, the best in the class. This skill was particularly valuable at Iowa State, which had an abominable offensive line during the entirety of Monty's stay. In 2018, advanced metrics pegged that line as one of the 20 worst in all of the FBS in run blocking, with the best of the bunch ranking as PFF's No. 115 overall run blocker. It was rare to see Monty break past the line of scrimmage unencumbered by penetration or contact, issues that guys like Harris or Jacobs didn't have to deal with. Montgomery is a pop-up doll made of Kevlar. When you hit him, it hurts you more than him, and there's a decent chance you end the exchange on the ground and he doesn't. Sure, he averaged only 4.4 YPC, but he averaged 3.5 YPC after contact. As College Football Factory's Kyle Francis noted, USC's Ronald Jones also averaged 3.5 YPC after contact in college but 6.3 YPC in some, meaning that USC's line blocked 2 free yards for him in comparison to Monty on every play. Francis astutely points out that Frank Gore's collegiate YPC average, 4.8, was nearly identical to Montgomery's, 4.7. If Montgomery had played on Oklahoma, he would be considered one of the best college running backs of the past decade. It's a miracle that Montgomery retained his patience and vision while playing behind that unit. Well, maybe not. Life taught him to keep persevering no matter the obstacles. built to batter with no superfluous surface area, Montgomery smoothly swipes left on non-viable running lanes until he sees an opening. Well, I lied, no superfluous surface outside of his arms, which are quite long for his frame. Montgomery uses those to create space as a runner, while simultaneously guarding the ball like it's a newborn, and to give him a bigger catch radius than you'd think given his frame. As a receiver, Montgomery is a natural hands catcher with soft mitts who has the ability to utilize every inch of his catch radius. He moves with purpose and precision on his routes. I believe there is more ceiling to develop in this phase of his game. Montgomery had 58 catches the past 2 years with mediocre quarterback play. Campbell said he was one of the best pass catchers on the team, as well as one of the best route runners. When he stays home to block, Montgomery knows his assignment and takes to it the same intensity level he does while running. In the open field, Montgomery is a sawed-off colossus from X-Men, all rage and force. But like Colossus, he's not terribly fleet, with low 4.6 speed that will hopefully be amended to high 4.5 speed in Ames. Hunt ran a 4.62. Montgomery didn't break off a ton of explosive runs at Iowa State, and he isn't going to in the NFL either. He lacks long speed, and also high-end foot speed. And that's what makes his vision, decisiveness and contact balance so important. Montgomery doesn't have natural explosion to the hole, so he's found the perfect blend defense mechanisms to compensate by opening up alternative opportunities with his eyes or second, third, fourth opportunities with his power and shake. Montgomery gets nitpicked for what he isn't. But how about what he is? He's Kareem Hunt with a heart of gold. In college, close to broke but far from his former living situation, Montgomery would send $100 every few weeks to his brother, incarcerated on murder charges. This is a guy who'd never had money before, sending a portion of his stipend to a federal penitentiary because it wasn't an option to leave his brother behind. David Montgomery is going to give you everything he has on every snap, and you're going to be proud to have him in your organization. I'd bet a kidney that he's going to be a top 15 NFL running back for multiple years. I can't say that about any other back in this class. Josh Jacobs may have a higher ceiling, but Montgomery's floor is way higher. Surefire day one NFL starter who can be a bell cow yesterday. 2 Josh Jacobs, Alabama, 5'10", 220th SPARQ percentile, N.A. comp, Maldomil Kamara. To reach this moment, Jacobs embarked on an incredible made-for-TV journey. A zero-star recruit who was heavily used as a wildcat quarterback in high school, shades of Montgomery's situation, Jacobs finally garnered interest from the big boys after posting his prep highlights online. He was bumped to a 3-star when he was offered by Alabama, but that offer was provisional up until National Signing Day, when the Tide missed on some higher priority options. His first few months in Tuscaloosa, Jacobs slept on the floor of his dorm room. Not because the room didn't have a bed, but because Jacobs had just been sleeping on floors and couches and back seats for so long he was more comfortable on the harder surface. A legitimate diamond in the rough find, Jacobs vindicated Nick Saban's decision immediately, working his way into the rotation as a true freshman while flashing as PFF snow. One most elusive back in the country. The easy explosion, contact balance, and agility were apparent early. No doubt with the NFL in mind, Jacobs set about bulking up for what he probably thought was going to be his national coming-out party as a sophomore. And while he looked good, retaining his athleticism while adding even more oomph as a runner and blocker with the newfound muscle, Jacobs' body betrayed him. He hobbled through a torn hamstring, which hurt his effectiveness and rendered him just another body in the rotation behind Damian Harris. Then, Jacobs fractured his ankle. Only nobody knew it, because he kept it to himself. He showed up to the SEC title game against Georgia wearing a protective boot. The media asked about it. Jacobs said it was a minor issue, no biggie. Tough as nails. The injury details didn't come out until the following year. Coming into last year, Jacobs, championed by the fringe, Healthy again in 2018, Jacobs finished second in RB touches amid Alabama's three-headed platoon. Damian Harris had 32 more, Najee Harris had 19 fewer. In contrast to the overlooked Jacobs, the Harrises were each RB1 in their respective recruiting classes, 2015 and 2017. Jacobs scored 14 TD and broke through nationally at the end of the season, flashing during the Tide's run to the title game, and then a weird thing happened. The guy who was arguably the most underrated player in his high school recruiting class, and the guy who was one of the nation's most underrated weapons on a per-play basis for his first 2.5 seasons suddenly saw his profile explode. Daniel Jeremiah mocked him in the top 10, he was seen as the consensus RB1 and anybody with a divergent opinion was. Members of the community brawled in Jacobs' threads like the Anchorman fight scene over who discovered him first. The Jacobs narrative swung so decidedly to the other polarity that he passed right through the properly and objectively rated phase and became, I'm arguing, a bit overvalued. In our enthusiasm to at long last give Jacobs his due, we made it about us, and not about him. A year ago, I would have bet you $1,000 that I would be higher on Jacobs than the critical consensus once the 2019 NFL Draft kicked off. I would have lost that bet. I like Jacobs. I like him a lot, but I wouldn't draft him in round 1. In part because it's a poor value proposition to take a running back that high, and in part because this is a guy who was outplayed by Damian Harris throughout his career who then, justifiably, passed on the key NFL scouting combine tests, which introduces unknowns into his athletic profile that will hopefully be answered at his pro day workout. There's this certainty about Jacobs, that he's Alvin Kamara 2.0 and an uber-safe bet to be an early NFL star. 6 runners have gone in the top 20 of the past 6 drafts. Rarefied air. And I can't get there in this evaluation. We never saw Jacobs as the lead back at Alabama, never saw him in the bell cow role. And despite a perfect situation for a player of his type, his per-touch numbers were worse than Harris's, a prospect I'm not particularly high on, see below. Last year, Jacobs got 140 touches after getting a combined 159 between 2016-2017. With increased usage, he set a career low in yards per touch by 0.9 yards per touch, 5.3. And sure, it was with more usage and a higher percentage of carries baked in. But Damian Harris averaged 6.3 yards per touch in 2018, with 32 more touches, 30 of which were carries. Harris also got more run early in games against energetic starters as the lead back in the platoon. More of an effort was made to get Jacobs in space, and he got more second-half touches in blowouts against gassed starters or second-stringers. That's not all. Harris averaged 6.6 yards per touch over 529 career touches, 477 carries, 52 catches at Alabama, while Jacobs averaged 6.9 over 299, 251 48ths. In general, it's a fool's errand to use a few rate stats to support your stance on a prospect, because numbers are contextual, but, in this case, we're comparing apples to apples situations between 2 top draft prospects at the same position. Do those stats say nothing? I've heard the argument that Alabama misused and underutilized Jacobs. I don't totally buy that. Lane Kiffin, Brian Daboll and Mike Locksley, all justifiably platooned running backs in Tuscaloosa, each had a minimum of 3 runners on the roster who would have started on more than 100 of the other 129 FBS teams. Damian Harris made for your classic steady Eddie led back, while Jacobs was worked in on passing situations while waiting his turn to be inserted for an entire series. Jacobs was used situationally, and in Nick Saban's opinion leveraged optimally, and his rough per-play damage wasn't significantly higher than Harris's despite marked usage differences. And that's worth thinking about. 3 things that concern me about Jacobs. He's never been a 3-down back, he's struggled with injuries despite the reduced workload. In addition to his frustrating sophomore season, Jacobs' junior season of high school was also hampered by a shoulder injury, and then he pulled out of the NFL Combine with a possibly phantom groin injury, and his athleticism isn't off the charts. Hopefully, we'll get a clearer picture at his pro day. but I can tell you that the speed and burst are only solid, not sensational. And I think that's why Jacobs was never Harris's equal as a pure runner at Alabama. You simply don't see many Grand Slam runs on his tape. He's patient behind in the line and doesn't have a acceleration, think Kerryon Johnson, and he isn't terribly nuanced in the open field, where he runs with urgency and oomph but provides direct pursuit angles for defensive backs, who don't have to worry about him tapping the brakes or changing lanes to exit onto another freeway. Where Jacobs shines is in the departments of power, shake, versatility and grit. On passing downs, he's the best back in the class. He's a polished receiver who knows what he's doing on routes and picks it clean. He's got a ton of potential as a pass blocker. Some of his crushing blows of unsuspecting blitzing linebackers are. Lance Zierlein comps Jacobs to Sony Michel, which I can totally see. My friend Arif Hassan and I refer to Jacobs as Maldo Meal Kamara, similar to the original but lacking the same rich, nuanced flavor. Whereas Kamara's marshmallows are light and rich, Jacobs are dense and sugary. Get Jacobs into an attacking offensive system that needs a back to do a lot of different things well but doesn't require a ton of nuance, a simplified one-cut system where his running decisions are the binary and his strengths in the passing game can be leveraged. My dream is for him to land in Kansas City as Pat Mahomes' sidekick. 3. Devin Singletary, FAU, 5'9", 208th SPARQ percentile, 20.0 comp, Devontae Freeman, Philip Russ, he's short, he's skinny, he comes from Conference USA, and he isn't very fast. What isn't to love? A kid. Motor has always been more than the sum of his parts. A high school standout, Singletary didn't receive the national attention he should have. The three-star recruits' choices for school came down to a low-end Power 5 destination, Illinois, or to stay local at FAU. He flipped to the Owls late, rode out a coaching change, and then absolutely dominated the past 2 years under Lane Kiffin. In 3 seasons, over 714 carries, Motor averaged 6.0 YPC. He ran for 4,287 yards and 66 TD, while posting a 5.1, 3.97 line as a receiver. Despite his lack of foot speed, and despite his lack of muscle. They don't have a test in Indianapolis for how hard it is to get you onto the ground. If they did, Motor and David Montgomery would have lapped the field. Montgomery does it more with power than agility, though he also possesses the latter. Motor does it with agility, though he also possesses some power. Each have absurd balance. Sometimes, with Motor, the only way you can get the play to end is by pinning him in near the sideline without an escape route, so that he has to step out and surrender himself. What Singletary lacks in foot speed he more than makes up for with foot quickness. His feet test the space-time continuum, like a time traveler in a television show who has a gun pointed at his head, disappearing only to show up a split second later behind the unsuspecting gunman. I'm talking unfair shake, even at high speeds, and especially in precarious phone booth situations. Motor is the rare bird who can score a touchdown in a scenario where 2 free defenders have him dead to rights on his side of the line of scrimmage post-snap. It's like watching an old episode of Batman, where bad guys surround the hero 1 minute and the next, bam, whack, are splayed around the room unconscious. Motor takes the handoff, sees the heavy penetration. He combos a half jump stop with 2 stutter steps to short-circuit the defender's brains and force their feet to betray their intentions. Then, he shoots forward, disappearing from the camera's view for a second as he enters the teeth of the scrum through the gap occupied by one of the free defenders. With any other player, the whistle is about to blow. But in the split second your naked eye just missed, Motor was running through an arm tackle of one of the fools he just clowned in the narrow hole between his left guard and tackle and, in the 3 steps that followed, accelerated to peak speed. By the time he re-emerges into view, as if a miracle, Motor has not only broken free from the black hole scrum that has engulfed most of the planets in this football solar system, but he's now alone in the second level at top speed pointed towards the end zone. If you've only got one safety back there who's unoccupied, start sending your kick block unit onto the field, because the cannons are gonna fire in a second. Do I care that he's undersized and slow? Sure. I care to the extent that I rank Motor behind Montgomery and Jacobs. But I can't go lower than this. I'm sorry. The players in the past 5 classes I think of when I think of Motor are Devonta Freeman and Dalvin Cook, 2 fellow undersized Floridians who are also below-average athletes. Like Motor, Freeman and Cook were full-spectrum vision slashers with catch-the-chicken agility in close quarters who shrunk like Ant-Man through closing portals as woolly mammoths fought for leverage above, just as Motor's plus agility and vision help offset his lack of deep speed, his Walter White as Heisenberg determination, assuredness and fearlessness with the ball in his hands offset his lack of standing still in street clothes power. You aren't taking Motor down with an arm tackle. He wasn't tackled on first contact, per PFF, on 57.2% of his touches, good for number 2 in the class. That's right, this little string bean is not only elite at making you miss, but he was also elite at breaking tackles in college. Motor is also a skilled receiver. You'll have to return to 2017 to see it, as FAU's offense lost all its creative chutzpah this past season when Lane Kiffin was replaced. Charlie Wise' 24-year-old son and receiving was yanked from Motor's list of things to do, and a downright violent pass blocker who is looking to light you up. I don't buy that Singletary is a boom or bust prospect, because guys who are difficult to touch and more difficult to tackle don't often fail. SPARQ score couldn't quantify Dalvin Cook or Devonta Freeman's inane ability to create doubt in defenders' minds. Guys like this play faster and bigger than they are on the football field because they force opponents to play slower and smaller than they are. If you're saying I can get Motor Singletary in late round 3, I've already got a card written out with his name on it. 4. Miles Sanders, Penn State, 5'11", 211th SPARQ percentile, 78.8 comp, medium rear Cadillac Williams with a side of Felix Jones. You know how the Harris brothers at Alabama were RB1 in 2015 and 2017. Miles Sanders was the guy between them, the premier back in the 2016 class. He curiously chose Penn State despite the fact that a freshman named Saquon Barkley had just single-handedly made that Christian Hackenberg-led offense watchable. Shout out to Chris Godwin, Deshaun Hamilton and Kyle Carter. Unlike David Montgomery, who didn't need much time to shove aside Mike Warren, Sanders couldn't unseat the old guard. In Sanders' case, the old guard was a generational NFL talent. A one-year starter, Sanders finished with a mere 276 career carries, only topping Elijah Holyfield 215, Josh Jacobs 251, and Dexter Williams 257, among the consensus top 20 RBs in this year's class. Sanders does not have a significant injury on his ledger and he's arguably taken fewer big hits than any back in the class. In that sense, and in the sense that he's a good athlete with 5-star pedigree in a game that fits where the NFL is going, he's safe. Where risk enters Sanders' equation is in the subtleties, feel and trustworthiness. At present, Sanders is a classic slasher who knows his way around a PS4 controller with an array of jukes and spins. Good Miles Sanders is the Miles Sanders who sees the hole, bursts into it smoothly, makes a defender miss in the claustrophobia zone, angles to the sideline, and then punches the gas. Good Miles Sanders is a patient runner who works with his blockers, a guy with several gears who is methodical when he needs to be methodical, twitchy when he needs to be twitchy, and fast when he needs to be fast. Good Miles Sanders has the hips of a hula girl, the flair for combos of a boxer, and the go with the flow and ride the wave instincts of a surfer. Good Miles Sanders is a surefire starting NFL running back. Good Miles Sanders was made to feast in his own blocking scheme. I love that Sanders also brings a ton of value in the passing game. And since he's had very limited reps, I think it's fair to project continued growth as a receiver and as a pass blocker, 2 areas he's already above average in. Sanders is skilled enough to line up in the slot. If he continues to develop in this area, he's going to become a real weapon to a creative offensive staff. But Sanders' inexperience showed on the field at times last season. He's smooth and sleek in action, a natural, but Sanders does not yet see the entire field and anticipates several moves ahead. Vision and feel are two things he possesses. He's not just as hill, but Sanders hasn't yet reached that intuitive zone where everything around him slows down and he sees every possibility like Dr. Strange. That's how he really levels up, and it's possible to project that growth because Sanders had less than half the touches that Devin Singletary and David Montgomery had the past 3 years. With more reps come more feel. It's like with anything, there is another area in need of work in the meantime. Bad Miles Sanders is a guy who is loose with the ball. Bad Miles Sanders is a guy who loses his decisiveness and doesn't have world-class athleticism or a big power element to his game to fall back on. And when he's making mistakes and losing confidence, Bad Miles Sanders can let a tough matchup become an impossible one. He struggled in 3 of Penn State's biggest games this season, but to be entirely fair, Miles Sanders was in a different situation than Saquon Barkley was. In 2017, Penn State had Hamilton and Mike Gesicki around to salvage Trace McSorley's Ducks and give the Knits' passing attack more bite. The receiving corps sharply regressed in 2018. McSorley turned into an AAF third stringer and defenses zeroed in on Sanders without fear of getting shredded through the pair. If Sanders' mind can catch up to his body, he's going to become one of the best backs in this class, perhaps even the very best. The ceiling is that high. He's going to perceive more opportunities to gouge you, and he's going to make you pay. If it doesn't, he's just a good-looking back with a briefcase full of BRA tools who has AC game, a decent committee guy, eminently replaceable. 5. Damian Harris, Alabama, 5'10", 216th SPARQ percentile, 57.3% comp, a Coca-Cola Classic mix of Kareem Hunt's athletic profile, elements of Carlos Hyde, and Kenneth Dixon's college game on a bigger stage. Damian Harris is a Minnesota hot dish at a family dinner in December. Old reliable, homey. A dinner that manages to be enjoyable and filling and perfect for the occasion but not worth asking about and interesting despite the fact that it was made from 16 different ingredients, a dish everyone will enjoy but nobody will tell their coworkers about on Monday morning. Harris was considered a mega talent coming out of high school, the Kentucky Gatorade Player of the Year award in 2013. In a 2015 scouting report, 247 Sports, Alan True wrote that Harris was a big playback who can go the distance from anywhere on the field. Rivals ranked Harris as the No. 8 overall prospect in the country. His career was an unmitigated, smashing success. And yet it never felt totally fulfilling. And that's because Harris never took a game. RB1 in your recruiting class hints that you're a game-changing talent. Harris wasn't. In Alabama's offense, he was Draymond Green, while Tua did his Steph Curry thing, Calvin Ridley did his Kevin Durant thing, Jerry Jeudy did his Klay Thompson thing, and Josh Jacobs did his Boogie Cousins thing. Draymond as a championship piece, absolutely, but you also